and welcome back to Workshop Wednesday. I'm Chelsea Buzzemeyer. Thanks for joining me today in my workshop, and today I'm going to show you how you can take a pattern for any top really and turn it into this adorable back. So this t-shirt started out with just a plain Jane regular back, and I've adjusted it and created this super cute top. Now this idea actually came up a couple of months ago. I was teaching one of my club classes. That's my monthly membership sewing class. We do live virtual classes every month, and students bring their projects, what they're working on, and I help them either do their pattern adjustment, problem solve, give them some techniques of how I would put something together, whatever it is. They're a lot of fun, but I had this one student, and she was working on a top and had finished it, put it together, and it was a little tight across the shoulders. So we're like, what can you do? How could you add a little extra fullness? Now, the thing about this top is it had cut-on sleeves, just like the one I have on the mannequin, and was pretty straight cut. And we were just toying around with ideas, and I thought, why don't you add a yoke? So adding a seam, whenever you have seams and darts, you can add in more shape to your garment, and it gives you an opportunity to add some more fullness. And when you add gathers like this, then you can also get a little bit of extra volume. So she needed more volume right across the back, and I loved the idea so much. I was like, I have to use this on a design as well. I want to have a top with this detail just because the detail is so cute. Not because I need it for the volume in this garment, but because it's just an adorable kind of pattern hack design style detail. Now, let's take a look at the shape of the original pattern and the adjustments you would need to do to your top if you would like to make this design with any pattern that you have at home. So this is a little paper pattern of the top that my club student had. She had the pattern there and had already cut it out and just found that it was a little bit tight across the shoulders when she sewed it together. Then she was working with, that little bit of scrap fabric, so not enough to cut out a full back. And of course, having to unpick it all and redoing it would be frustrating too. And since the shoulders were perfect, the shoulders fit really well, that's where we came up with adding the fullness just in the area that she needed it. So doing the yoke on the top part of the garment and then adding some extra volume to the back. Now we did this curved yoke so that we could bring the seam above the shoulder blades. If we went straight across, we wouldn't have really been adding any volume in the reach that the shoulders themselves had, because that seam wouldn't be stretchy and the fabric above would be the same amount. So since we curved it up, we're getting more volume right across the shoulder blades, and that's exactly what we wanted, because we need the volume where we need the volume. And of course, there's a bunch of different ways you could add the volume. You could do pleats, you could do an inset of some kind if you needed to use the same piece of fabric. You could do a really neat kind of lace inset to spread this apart. But we just put in the seam, the curved seam, and then what I'm going to do on mine is just add a little bit of extra fullness at the top that blends out by the hem, and then we'll gather that back up and attach it during the sewing process. Now this particular t-shirt is very, very similar to my Kelsey top. So if you're looking for a pattern and you want to do this with it and you want to use your own body's measurements and draft your own pattern, I'll put a link in the description box where you can go and get yourself a recorded version of that class where I walk you through taking your measurements, drafting your pattern, and then sewing the garment. So it's a whole sew along tutorial where you can make a garment similar to this. In the example, my top has a little bit longer sleeves and is a little bit shorter, more of a crop top, but you can easily add the length and shorten the sleeves if you want this exact kind of shape to it, whatever you like. There's so many pattern hacks you can do, but let's skip right ahead to doing this adjustment on the center back. of my pattern. So this is the pattern I'm going to use today. I do have just a little cap sleeve, and this I just need the extra for folding in for the hem. And I actually do have another video where I copied this pattern from a t-shirt that I really, really love, and I love the copy as well. So that's why I thought, you know what, I'm going to use this and just do this cute little pattern hack on this t-shirt pattern, and then I'll have another pattern that I really, really love. So first we're going to just copy the yoke portion. So we'll need to define where our seam is going to be, and I do have this light marking here, but I'm just going to show you how you would want to mark it on. We're going to do a tiny little right angle here so that it's a smooth transition. We don't want it to be a point in any way. And then you can do the shape whatever way you'd like. You could do even a diamond shape and just do a straight line. So I'm going to do this type of a shape, follow my original line. I want mine to end below where the sleeve is, because I want the yoke not to be cut in half in the sleeve. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to grab my pattern wheel. You could slash this pattern as well, but I want to keep the original pattern. I just have this line in here to follow along, but I do want to make myself some more t-shirts that are exactly the same. So I'm just going to run my pattern wheel right along this line, and then it will show me where I want the seam to be on the tissue below. And I'm going to take this marker and also trace the rest of just the yoke. We're going to be doing a few more adjustments to the lower portion of the top, adding that extra fullness. So that's why I'm just going to trace the yoke part. Okay, so now that that's traced, I'm going to remove that, and I can see my little polka dot line from my pattern wheel. So that's where the seam is going to be. So I still need to add my seam allowance. So you can always add a seam wherever you like. You can chop up a pattern, even if you're not changing the style, but adding just adding seams. Maybe you like to do piecework. Always, always, always add the seam allowance back on so that your pieces aren't shrinking when you sew them back together. So I'm just doing kind of a little dotted line that I can follow. I'm doing a 1 centimeter seam allowance. I love the 1 centimeter seam allowance. It's about 5/8 of an inch. That's kind of my standard go-to. There we go. So we've separated off the top portion and we've added our seam allowance. So this part of the top is now complete. Now we need to finish this lower portion. So what I'm going to do here, since I'm just tracing my pattern, I'm not chopping up my original one, I'm going to start out by just laying it. I think I'm going to add about 1.5 inches. Yeah, that's about exactly 1.5 inches to be gathered up, just right at the center. I'm going to put this on here so it doesn't move around. And I'm going to just start by tracing my line again. And I'm going to continue off just at a right angle. If I wanted to gather farther down, I might want to do a couple of slash lines and spread the pattern. But since I'm keeping it right at the center and I already have a small section that is at a right angle, I'm just going to keep it at that right angle. And then I'm going to trace the bottom section. Now this is another adjustment I'm going to do, is I want to add just a little bit more length on the side. I have pretty pretty extreme kind of shirt tail happening, and that I want to tone down. I don't want to lose any of the length of my top, but I do want to just bring the side down a tiny bit so it's not as a dramatic shirt tail. So I'm going to copy it here and blend it. I also recut the front to just add this tiny little bit. But that was the only adjustment that I needed to do on the front. Okay, so now I've traced this. Move my original pattern out of the way. And I'm just going to copy my polka dot pattern wheel line. So once again, this is just the seam or the stitch line. I'm not going to put any markings into as from where to where I want the gathers to start and end, as I'm just going to run a gathering stitch here, gather it up, and play around with it and see how tight I want them, if I want them really close together or spread out along a wider distance. Of course, again, you could put a pleat in if you wanted right in the center, whatever you like. And then I'm going to add my seam allowance. Okay, so now I've added extra fullness to the center back. I've separated the lower portion and the top portion, and I've added my seam allowance where I'm going to connect these pieces back together. So the last step is to cut them out, and then I can cut and sew my top. I've got my fabric all cut out, and boy was it hard to decide what fabric to use. You can see here that my yoke, I'm actually doing this lace. And then for the t-shirt part, I've got this beautiful turquoise jersey. I almost did a chiffon back, so that again would be a combination of woven and knits, and the back wouldn't really have stretch to it, but because of the gathers, we'd have that extra volume. I'm definitely gonna have to try that in the future, but today I decided to keep it knit all the way around and just switch out the yoke here with the lace. So first things first, we're going to take our bottom portion. Oh, I didn't notch it. I always like to notch my center. Let's do that first. So I'm just going to lay my two halves back together so that I can see exactly where the center back is. This will be super helpful so that I don't have more gathers on one side than the other. I can line up that center back and then do a similar amount of gathering on either side. And because I'm just playing around with this design, I'm going to start my gather stitch quite a ways away from the center back, just to make sure that I have it long enough. I just want to kind of have it central in the middle, but I want to make sure I have enough stitches, and I just have my sewing machine set for a really large stitch. And I'm just going to stitch on the inside of that 1 centimeter seam allowance. So 5/8 if you're working with inches, just so that my gather stitching won't be caught in the actual closure seam, but I also don't want my stitching to be on the garment itself. So this way, since I'm just on the inside of my full seam allowance, I can leave this gather stitching in even when the garment's finished. I don't have to unpick it. But it is nice to have it really close to where your stitch line is going to be so that your gathers can be really fine. If it's too far, like in the middle of your seam allowance, then your gathers are going to be full and more of small pleats than in fine gathers. Pull this out here, give myself a little bit of an extra long thread, and then gather this together a little bit. So I'm just going to match up now my center back with the center back on my lace, and for this I'm just going to mark it with a pin. It's kind of hard to tell where a notch is on lace just because it has little notches all over the place depending on the design. So that's my center back, and this is my center back. So I'm going to just line these up, and then I'm going to also come over to the side seam and attach it with a couple of pins, because I know I don't want any gathers right over at the side. It's actually my sister's birthday today, so I was thinking when I cut it out, oh, maybe I should give it to her for her birthday, because it is colors I think she would love. I was kind of excited about having it though myself, so this would be an extra gift of love to give it to her. I can always sew myself another one, but will I is the question. So we'll get the same thing on this side. Okay, so now that I have both ends pinned on, then I can see how much extra fabric do I actually have. I added that 1.5 inches that I need to gather up and spread, divide throughout the garment. So I'm just gonna tighten up my thread here until it matches up size-wise with my lace. Now, when I'm doing gathers that like kind of fade out, I do typically like them to be a little bit denser right in the center and then kind of softly fade out rather than having just an abrupt end to them. So I'm going to kind of play with that as well. And the other thing I want to look out for is I want the gathers to be to end roughly the same distance from the center back. So since I didn't mark where I started and stopped with my gathering stitch here, I still want to make sure that the gathers are about the same distance so that I don't have soft or longer gathers on one side and really bunchy gathers on the other. And that looks about the same distance. So that's looking really nice. I'm going to just throw in a pin right at the start and end of the gathers so that they don't move around on me. And I am going to go over this seam with my serger, but I'm just going to go over it once here with my regular lock stitch, my straight stitch machine, and then serge it together afterwards. So the lock stitch is just kind of holding it in place. The lace is also less stretchy. It still has some stretch, but it's less stretchy than the knit. So using this non-stretch stitch isn't really a big deal since this seam itself doesn't have as much stretch as the rest of the t-shirt material does. So let's get this closed. And that's how you would go about piecing together this seam. Okay, there we go. I used the white thread just because I'm working with 2 colors here, and I thought, you know what, the white would show nicely on the tutorial for you guys. But whenever you're piecing 2 colors together, you just have to pick one thread because it'll match one side and it won't match the other. So now we have our back piece, our back panel ready to go, and we can stitch together the rest of our garment. So here you go. You can see that the seam here is nicely closed. The nice lace top. If lace isn't your thing, but you like the idea of it, you could always use the lace and layer a second layer of fabric underneath, maybe a contrasting fabric, the same color. You can play around with a lot of different types of fabric here. And of course, you can see that the rest of the t-shirt is already also put together. And if you would like to see the sew along version of how I sewed this t-shirt, I will put the link in the description box for both the sew along and how I copied the pattern originally from a pre-existing t-shirt that I really liked. And I actually realized I have the t-shirt on today, so it's exactly the same, just without that yoke in the back. And yeah, both those links will be there. And I actually pulled out my Kelsey top pattern. So this is full size pattern for the Kelsey top. So if you want more of that basic square pattern, or you'd like to play around with drafting your own patterns from your body's measurements, then the link for the Kelsey top sew along class, that's a 3-hour class, and all of the details are on the page there where you can order yourself a copy of the Kelsey top class. So that brings us to the end of this week's episode of Workshop Wednesday. I hope you enjoyed this quick little pattern hack. I love just trying new things. And like I said, I have to try this now with chiffon in the back too. I think that would be really nice. Every time I make something, it gives me an idea of at least one other project that I want to make. There's so many things you can do. It's super fun to be creative and to know how you can adjust your patterns and make new and exciting designs, especially if you know you already like the fit. So don't forget to pop over to my Facebook group if you're not already a member there, and sign up for my email list if you'd like more content. And I do a little blog post every week, and you can find out more about what I'm sewing and the classes that I'm offering. And of course, if you would like to be a member of the club, try it out for 1 month, for 6 months, however long you want, just head on over to my YouTube channel homepage, and you can just click on the About button, and it will bring out my email address. So shoot me an email, and I'd be happy to send you more information about the club or get you signed up right away. So that brings us to the end of this episode. I hope you'll join us next week for Workshop Wednesday. Until then, take care and happy sewing.